less than a minute, 3 geeks will join an audience on the internet from probably not that many places, and we will be launching the best film review podcast in the history of mankind. Mankind. That word should have new meaning for all of us today. We can't be consumed by our petty differences anymore. We will be united in our common interests. Perhaps it's fate that today is probably not actually a holiday and you will once again be listening to a bunch of geeks. Not normal geeks, average geeks, or slightly odd geeks, but mega geeks. We're recording a podcast for our right to live, to exist. And should we successfully complete this show, today will still probably not be known as a holiday, but as the day when at least some of the world declared in one voice, we will not go quietly into the night. We will not vanish with at least saying goodbye. We're going to live on. We're going to survive. Today, we're making a goddamn podcast. There you go. You're welcome. I did that for you mostly, Becca.
That was beautiful. Thank you.
Not at all for David.
It was everything I wanted.
Have opinions in a hot minute. Anyway, I'm Shaun.
I'm Becca.
I'm David.
And on today's show, in honor of the holiday that isn't actually happening, we're discussing all 12 films. Wait, who wrote this? All 12 films of the Friday the 13th franchise, which is not what we're talking about, but it is Friday the 13th. So.
This is Daniel, right?
Yeah, this is Daniel. We'll be live streaming a walkthrough of 1989's Friday the 13th video game for the NES, apparently.
Oh, God.
We wish we were doing that today. But in fact, we've come to... But instead, we're going to be talking about Independence Day after you, Shaun, decided that Becca should finally see it and that I should sit through that fucking speech again.
Oh, just you
what
wait.
Was wrong with the speech?
That's only the first time I'm going to do it. Oh, David
yeah,
will
it
get
kind
to
of
it.
you already kind of did the speech, so it kind of ruins the script line, you know?
Oh, it wasn't his speech. I was thinking of Bill Pullman. Well, the Pullman speech.
The Pullman, President Whitmore speech, as they call it.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, yeah, so we're talking about the 1996 masterpiece that is Independence Day, directed by Roland Emmerich and written by the director with Dean Devlin. It stars Will Smith, Bill Pullman, Jeff Goldblum, Mary McDonnell, Judd Hirsch, Margaret Collin, Randy Quaid, Robert Loggia, Vivica A. Fox, James Reborn, and the luscious, gravelly voice suave of Harvey Fierstein.
That was some gravel. I really thought I was seeing Beetlejuice on Broadway.
Oh yeah,
That's what
I know
it
what
reminded
you're talking about.
me of. Yeah.
Raspmeister.
Okay, Becca, you're actually next in the script. You want to follow
I'm
along,
so sorry.
Yeah.
Right.
Cool. Thanks a lot, Becca. We're trying to make this smooth and professional, just like they did in the movie.
I'm not smooth and professional. Before we get into the discussion, a reminder to please share your comments, questions, or suggested topics with us at skiffyandfanty.com/listener suggestions. If you aren't already, join us live each Friday at 7 Central on Shaun's Alphabet Streams Twitch to be part of our interactive live streaming format, or join us anytime for interaction on our Discord. Finally, please join our Patreon and be part of our exclusive content. It only takes as little as $1 a month, and lets others know about how fabulous we are.
Yay. All right, David, if you would be so kind, would you give us a brief summary of this movie?
A mega huge spaceship arrives in orbit around Earth, disgorging mile-wide saucers that assemble over various famous American landmarks, which they proceed to demolish in utterly spectacular fashion. Humanity is on its knees. It will be up to the combined efforts of Dr. Exposition, played by Jeff Goldblum, and Captain Quip, played by Will Smith, to put paid to these evil aliens with help of a computer virus they can upload to their Microsoft Windows-compatible computers.
I mean...
Solid.
Pretty close.
Flawless logic.
You did forget to mention one of the greatest presidential speeches ever given by a president, including
By President Ernest, played by Bill Pullman.
Yeah. Well, what's wrong with Bill Pullman? He's just perfectly suitable. I'd vote for him. Come on.
He's
Let's be
extremely
real,
earnest.
Dave. Be real, David.
He is very earnest.
When he runs for mega president of the whole world, right after this, you'd vote for him too.
Because I probably wouldn't have any choice. Moving on then.
Wow. Okay. Great. So part of why Becca is here is partly your age, Becca, because you are a youngin', and you had not seen this movie, and this movie I think was very important to me as a child. I was young-ish, but one of the things that I think that really, I hope that David and I will talk about this positively without attacking each other too much, but this film, I think, has a very interesting place in film history that I may have a slightly different experience of than David, because, frankly, David, we're slightly different age groups, and you may have experienced it a little bit differently than I did. But I remember when this film came out, there was an ad spot in the Super Bowl for this. There were like television spots explaining some of the special effects shots that they did, you know, kind of pretty decent detail showing you behind the scenes of how they like blew up cities and all these kinds of things. There was like this great sort of national spectacle, at least in the United States. I don't know if it was different in Canada, where, you know, they really wanted us to like feel this was an event movie in a way that like now it kind of feels like every movie is an event movie. But in 1996, like the blockbuster was still distinct from like the rest of cinema. And I imagine, David, you may have more to add to this, but it seems...
I mean, it...
Go ahead.
It's a bit. I mean, it was... I mean, I wouldn't... I mean, okay, we hadn't achieved, you know, the kind of the full spectrum dominance of the superhero, which seems to have perhaps passed, but that particular state we weren't in. But the blockbuster, as the kind of dominant summer thing, was very much a thing. I mean,
Yes.
I do remember all the ads then too, and this was the big May film. And yeah, I remember all the ads too. And I mean, the trailer that with the money shot of the White House exploding. I mean, when we all saw that, it was okay. This was looking like the coolest movie ever made, and so we all went rushing out to see it. But certainly, I mean, the summer blockbuster. As a phenomenon was very, very well established by 1996. I mean, that, you know, Star Wars and Jaws, or rather Jaws than Star Wars, really inaugurate that. And then we have it, you know, a very, very solid consolidation all through the 80s and into the 90s. So already by the 90s, it's just like, which movie is it that's coming out for the May long weekend?
Yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't really happen as much anymore.
Yeah, I feel... Yes, that's true, but I guess I feel like part of what I'm trying to get across is like, yeah, obviously the blockbuster's not new in 1996, right? It's had essentially 2 decades. I think the thing I'm trying to get across is like the sense in which like there could be films that were like, this is the big film of the year, or this, like, these handful of films are the big films of the year, versus now where it's like, you know, well, maybe not now, but, you know, certainly a few years ago before COVID, where it's like, okay, but like which 5 Marvel movies, and which other big franchise film, and which other, where it's like, there are all of these big films that everyone expects are going to be a big fanfare, where at some point it kind of all, to me, it kind of like gets washed out in a way that like this film in my memory, I almost can't think of what else was the big it in summer at that time. I mean, I'm sure if I looked, I would remember, but this film is like cemented. It was in such a very potent way in my mind.
It was absolutely the event film of that year, right? It was the big hit, right? I think sort of the big franchise films, something big coming out almost every week. Yeah, that was certainly happening. I mean, I remember going with my friends virtually every week. Okay, what's the movie that's out this time? And one grim summer in the space of, I mean, it was almost back to back in my memory. We had the misfortune of seeing Speed 2, Cruise Control, Batman and Robin, and Spawn. It was a dark time, and so this was certainly the film of that summer, right? I mean, the fact that it's the one that we all remember from 1996. You're absolutely right about that. And yeah, and if you ask me what were some of the other big films of '96, off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you because this certainly dominated.
Yeah, I mean, I looked at the top 10 box office wise. Basically, nothing comes close to Independence Day in terms of box office. But the next biggest was Twister, which is like roughly 300 plus million less, which certainly was a big film. It was, a lot of special effects budget. I remember there was a ride for Twister, all these kinds of things. And then there's Mission Impossible, which was a pretty big film. And I imagine, I enjoyed Mission Impossible. I think it's pretty good. It's curious, though, if you look at what are the top films, the number of them that are in the same category as Independence Day, it's basically one, and it's just Twister. Otherwise, it's like thriller movies or animated films like The Hunchback of Notre Dame or 101 Dalmatians, or kids films like The Nutty Professor. I guess calling that a kids film is questionable because there's okay. And then some other, like Space Jam apparently was a big one. Okay. And then like Jerry Maguire, which is more of a serious film, and Ransom.
Which is interesting that, already we're getting very much on a sidetrack here, but yeah. The blockbuster dominance was very much a thing. We were moving towards, there was the range of movies that you had in the box office that you just described in 1996 compared to what it would have been 20 years earlier. It was very depressing, but it was as nothing compared to what would be happening almost 30 years later, when you're hard pressed to find something that isn't a sequel or a franchise or all from the same franchise.
Yeah. Somebody in chat on Twitch, Rainbow Warrior 71, mentioned Clinton's name, and I suppose if we want to bring this back to the specifics of the film, Emmerich did show this film to the Clintons, and it was given presidential approval, as it were. So you may be curious about that factoid. I guess I can't think of many films that explicitly have that as a piece of information about it, but it does say something about this film being distinctly American, which I imagine we'll come to in a minute. Becca, though, has been silent, and so I would like Becca to jump in. Any thoughts on what David and I have just pontificated about, or anything else you think you'd like to tell us about how much you actually love this film?
It was it was fine. I'm sorry, I'm gonna get shanked for this later. Looking at it from back then, I'm sure it was incredible, but looking at it now, of course, it is a monument of its time and special effects and everything. And
whoa! Hold the frickin' fort. What does that mean? Special effects and everything. What does that mean?
I'm sorry. It's just.
Please go on.
I had one main thing. Yes, this is a slightly more serious podcast than my usual torture cinema fare. Yes, but like the aliens weren't even hot.
Yeah, they're not the good guys, Becca.
And
we're not supposed to be confused by that.
No, in all honesty, this was actually a good film. I did enjoy it. It did make me tear up at moments. Like, it has a very good emotional range. Mm-hmm. I don't recall much about films growing up. They weren't actually super part of my childhood besides like VHS of like Disney films. Okay. Those were pretty much the only things that I watched like cinema-wise growing up. So I don't really have any context for the like larger cinematography universe until like late high school.
Okay.
So I didn't really have much to contribute to that part of your conversation, was why I was still silent. I'm so sorry.
Well, you have seen 2012, correct? Because that's also a Roland Emmerich film. He became known, I suppose, David, what's the name they gave him, like God of Disaster Films or whatever the phrasing is that he's gained a moniker for.
Thank you.
Yeah, certainly those are the films that he's best known for, right? He has that. he followed up Independence Day with the Misbegotten Godzilla and the Patriot, and then post his partnership with Dean Devlin, we get things like The Day After Tomorrow in 2012 and White House Down. I guess Moonfall, which is probably one of his most recent. He also did a couple of, for him, unusual departures. Anonymous, I think it was called, which was a Shakespeare conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
And Stonewall.
Yeah.
Well, it was funny that you mentioned Mission Impossible, because I love that series.
Mm-hmm.
And like that would actually be the one that I would look back on and be like, oh, neat, that's cool. I wouldn't have even thought about Independence Day as a movie, even though it was that summer blockbuster over Mission Impossible and everything. Because like Mission Impossible is the series that I actually recognize.
Well,
out of that group.
Surely part of that has to do with Mission Impossible as a franchise that has continued and is still continuing, and to some degree is doing now more than it was at the time, much more interest in the spectacle. Yeah, but that's not accounting for... Yeah. Whereas Independence Day has had a sequel, which is Independence Day Resurgence, but that sequel is, I think, almost universally reviled because it is not good. It is a very, very terrible film, and
it got the typical sequel treatment.
Yeah.
It's just 25 years late.
25 years late.
It didn't have to wait quite as long as Twister did for its sequel, but almost.
Yeah, and I think someone's asking if anyone's seen the sequel. I have, in fact, seen it. I'm pretty sure we've covered it on the in the Skiffy Fanty show.
We did an episode on it. Yeah,
and it does interesting things, and then conveniently has a plot that is almost nonsensical in a way that this makes this film look like it was written by geniuses. I'm not saying that Independence Day has the most compelling, perfect writing in the world. It is very much a fast-paced, moment-to-moment type plot. It has a very, I would say, fairly simplistic plot because, frankly, aliens show up, we got to destroy them. That's basically the premise. But, the resurgence seems to just forget that things have to connect together in a way that this actually is the opposite. There are things that happen at the beginning of this movie that are then returned to at the end. I mean, the example could be there's the reference at the very beginning where he's still wearing the wedding ring. And that comes up multiple times in different ways throughout the film until effectively we get the conclusion where clearly they're getting back together again at the end because she runs up and hugs him and it's a whole thing, right? And I think with Resurgence, they just lost that connective tissue. Things just kind of are abandoned for plot points that need to occur. It feels sort of like painting a picture, but there's missing sections of the picture. It doesn't tell you what colors to put into the paint by numbers because the numbers are missing in parts. So
more surface level than actually.
The other problem with Resurgence is that it shows Emmerich's usually very strong sense of the visual deserting him. One of the I think the great strengths of Independence Day is the visual, is the spectacle, right? And and I think one of Emmerich's greatest strengths as a director is this exuberance in the enormous possibilities of spectacle of the strange image, right? So the shots of the flying saucers over the cities, the sort of arrival billowing through the clouds, and of course the scenes of apocalyptic destruction, right? That really are the singular achievements of the film, and that he would then go. I would argue the gift of finding the strange in that, the surreal, he would continue to develop even more so in The Day After Tomorrow in 2012. In Independence Day Resurgence, he seems to have tried to inflate everything to the point that you don't know what you're looking at anymore. The images on the screen no longer make sense. As if
Yeah.
they expanded so far, they've gone beyond the frame, and so it's just stuff flying around. Without that, there are all kinds of moments in Independence Day, in Day After Tomorrow, in 2012, where he lets the image breathe. He lets us see the whole picture. The strange composition of, again, the ships coming out of the clouds, a freighter floating down the streets of Manhattan. St. Peter's Church rolling over the people in St. Peter's Square. All of these things that he really lets us see in those other films he fails to do in Resurgence.
I also want to note,
basically it gets the Marvel treatment.
Kinda.
Well,
in only
even
2
worse.
movies.
Yeah. I would say more like a DC treatment.
DC films suck, and that's universally acknowledged. DC does much better animated stuff than it does film.
By a mile. Yeah.
By a million miles.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think it's interesting that David focused on the visuals, because one of the notes that I had in rewatching this movie is not thinking the spectacle, but actually the ways in which this film pulls us away from that to focus on the human element. And there's a lot of essentially like visual enthymemes about the film's sort of underlying philosophy, if we will. And the scene that I think it immediately comes to mind is, initially we have this busy New York street of all these people making lots of noise, not necessarily getting along, running in the streets and all these kinds of things. And then the alien ship shows up, and we see many of those same people all basically lined up, all looking in awe and wonder and fear at this alien craft that has come out of this cloud of fire. And to me, it very much signifies the way that this film wants us to believe in this idea that you see in science fiction a lot, that there is this thing that will be the great unifier of everyone, where all of your differences fundamentally don't matter anymore, and the great unifier is big scary alien spaceship that wants to kill you, which is a silly idea, but is very well represented without it ever telling us explicitly. It just shows us this sea of people of all different shapes and sizes. Suddenly, any differences they have are irrelevant because there's something else before them. And this is repeated in a bunch of different ways throughout the film, and then sometimes said to us explicitly, in a way that I'm sure David will vomit later, because, of course, there is a political angle to that, too. But that's something I like in this film a lot, of just reminding us that the people are there and they matter. They're not just in cars getting thrown around in fire. It takes a moment even from those scenes to go back to people. Sometimes people we've seen before, so that we have some sympathetic connection, like Firestein's character, who somewhat comically dies, but we also still feel bad for him, or Vivica A. Fox as a character, or even just people. We don't know who they are. They're just people looking at this thing happening, freaking out and running in fear. That personal element, where we're not dealing with like little CG creatures running in the background. There's a human element in this that I really like a lot.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I did especially like how they portrayed the dichotomy of, here's the first lady and here's a stripper.
Yeah.
And they are both people, and one of them survives, and it's not the first lady.
Yeah.
So that human element really came through for me in that arc of everything gets brought together, and no one is, more important or more likely to live than the other. You can be the first lady of the United States, or you can be a stripper, and you have equal chances of living or dying.
Well, and even at that moment, right? It doesn't matter that she's the first lady, really. I mean, it does kind of matter for the story, but from a survival perspective, it's irrelevant. It doesn't. She's just a person. We have to help her. That's it, right? Other people may not know who she actually is. Vivica A. Fox does, and even when she mentions, "Oh, I'm an exotic dancer," and she's like, "Oh, I'm sorry." She's not, "I'm sorry, you're an exotic dancer." "I'm sorry because she thinks the wrong narrative about why she's an exotic dancer. And instead of like being super judgmental after getting the answer for Vivica A. Fox's character, she's just like, okie dokie, like, I'm just fine with that. And in the end, the fact that she was a stripper doesn't matter to the like politics of the film. Nobody gives a crap at the end. She's Vivica A. Fox. She's Jasmine. She marries Will Smith's character, right? I mean, perhaps she could have done something more at the end, I suppose, but like that's it's like a gender question because it's mostly dudes that get to be heroes in this, which this film has been criticized for before, and understandably so.
I mean, I think it is worth noting that scene you described of the interaction between the two women is pretty much the sum total of characterization of female characters in the entire movie, right? They are otherwise relegated to, at best, ornamental positions whose impact on the plot is absolutely nil.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, same.
Yeah. It's a thing that Resurgence tries to correct, but fails because none of the characters they come up with are interesting. But that's a different question. Yeah.
And I'll say that in I guess this is also, I mean, this is a recurring issue in Emmerich's films, right? Even in the ones that I like quite a bit more than this, in that female characters have never been particularly well represented in these films. We get a partial exception, perhaps, in White House Down, but I would say though that and also, I mean, certainly I'm not going to get be churlish and say that the plot of Independence Day doesn't make any sense, because it doesn't make, none of his films make any sense at the level of just rationalist logic, but that's not what they're interested in, right? It's the spectacle, it's the visceral charge that the films are exploring. But with the characters, I mean, as thinly sketched as the female characters are, I mean, though the male characters get to do everything in the film, they aren't really characters either, right? Though in none of his films will we really get really well-rounded characters, and that's not what the films are interested in. But we will get characters in some of the later films that are a little more recognizable as characters, as opposed to Jeff Goldblum playing generic Jeff Goldblum character.
He did a perfectly respectable job of playing Jeff Goldblum.
Yeah, Will Smith as Will Smith, Harvey Fierstein as Harvey Fierstein. You might be lucky enough to get a broad stereotype in a character, so you recognize them. Oh, they're this sort of a thing, but that's as far as it's going to go, right? You're not going to get really, I mean, to call anything that you get there an arc. Well, I mean, anything that I suppose that has more than a 0 degree change, it can qualify as an arc. But we don't really get that. Like there's, they're playing pieces rather than characters, but they are in the service of the spectacle, which is where the film really shines.
I think Jeff Goldblum's dad got a good arc. He came back to his religion.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. There's your broad stereotype, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we can criticize the film.
Judd Hirsch, Hirsching it.
Yeah, we could criticize it for being perhaps stereotypical. I don't know that I would agree with the criticism that it doesn't necessarily have true characters or character arcs. I guess for me, this. Perhaps you could criticize it for having fairly cookie cutter ones in some degree, although the idea that somebody marrying a stripper is a little bit weird, but a little bit outside of the norm, I should say. But I would say that unlike some films that fit into this same genre of film, like the big blockbuster, the big disaster film, where oftentimes even minor characters don't get some kind of fulfillment of an arc, however simplistic that is, happens in this story in a lot of different ways, mostly with the main characters, but even with some of the minor characters, as comedically Judd Hirsch's character, the father figure, does have an arc. It's a fairly simplistic one, but it is there. But the main characters get pretty well developed ones. Like, if you think about the plot structure of Will Smith's character's story, right, he's got multiple things going on, but the biggest one is we know that he is a pilot who has wanted to go to space. He wants to be an astronaut. And what does he ultimately get to do because he happens to be in the right place and has survived and has punched an alien out? He gets to become effectively Earth's first interstellar alien diplomat, we'll say. Right? Diplomat was a dude.
Diplomat?
I'm calling him a diplomat. Okay. He was bringing them a message from Earth.
Don't know if cookie cutter wish fulfillment counts as a character arc, and it's like you said, that's he just happens to be in the right place at the right time. There's nothing in his character that changes. This is. Yeah, well, I mean, this is a guy in terms of character, right? Who's spouting quips 30 seconds after his best friend's been killed.
His queer-coded best friend. Queer-coded best friend gets killed.
Yeah.
The two queer-coded characters in this film both get fridged. Like,
yeah, which is which is interesting. I mean, an interesting choice given Emmerich himself. I sort of wonder how much of that is Devlin's work and how much of that the fact that we then get Brent Spiner's character retconned.
In Resurgence,
in Resurgence is him, responding a bit to that.
Which character is that? I'm so sorry.
Oh, he's the wild scientist with the long hair who gets choked out by the alien.
Apparently dies in this one.
He totally dies.
Yeah, they bring him
he's
back,
and
it turns out he's a bit. He has a love for other scientists of the same gender. Yeah,
that fucker totally died.
Yeah, look,
they did the dead-eyed open stare and everything.
To be clear, nobody is suggesting that Independence Day Resurgence is a good movie that we should acknowledge as such. But in the context of this film, David is correct, and so are you, that Brent Spiner's doctor character, as quirky and weird and fun as he is, very clearly is dead in this film. There is no evidence that we are presented that he has lived, other than they didn't have a funeral, I guess. But by that logic,
they had a funeral for. They didn't even have a funeral for the First Lady.
They don't do that either. So,
well,
yeah.
Even in this film, they didn't do a funeral for the First Lady either. Like,
right. So I suppose she could come back too. Mary McDonald, she'll come back from the dead too.
That the impact of any of these deaths, right? The impact of any of the deaths is minimal, right? We because the movies is for us to have fun, so we're not really mourning really many of the characters any more than we are the hundreds of millions of people who get blown to Kingdom Come in the extremely cool kickoff for Act 2. It was either pitch meeting or honest trailers pointed out that Will Smith gets to be really sad about his friend for
2 seconds.
One entire shot, and then he's never mentioned again. There's a bit of crying over by husband and daughter of the death of the First Lady, and then we move on from her. So we are allowed to have like a 10 seconds of, well, that was sad after someone is dead, and then we move on to the next fun thing. Which is
But in fairness to this movie, I mean, when do people have time? Like the first city that gets blown up, it's not like the saucers took a break. We learn not long after that they've gone to other cities and nuked those out of existence. So like, to some degree, this is, I mean, I'm not saying Emmerich is doing this like very consciously or necessarily very effectively, but it is a trauma response. We're in a situation where we don't have time to give into those emotional impulses. We must move on. Of course, in a film like this, the solution to that is we must have a comedic moment, like where Will Smith's like kicking the alien and being like, I could be at a barbecue, which someone else referenced in the chat, the quips and so on, which I suppose is good for us because, as David, you're pointing out, if we actually sit down and try to like visually represent and feel the level of mass destruction, like how do you make that even operate in this and make a film that can still be fun? We just end up with Schindler's List. Right, which is a film that is a great film, but like to have a big action sequence in the middle of it would almost be like insulting to the rest of that movie. In this film, it kind of does the opposite, right? It like reverses. We're not going to focus on those very horrific images of death and just really emotionally impactful things. We have to like see them as spectacle long enough for us to know that it happens, maybe have brief moments of release, as it were, catharsis, only to then we have to get back to stopping aliens from murdering everyone else.
If you have a look at what cast your eyes over to Japanese cinema and what was accomplished in, let's say, the original Godzilla, or most recently in Godzilla -1, where we have the spectacle, we have the oh wow, and we have a huge emotional impact at the same time. Now, I also grant you that that's not what this film is interested in. Right,
Yeah.
so it'll pay lip service to this, and then go on to the, we're there to have fun, and the emotional stuff is only going to be little blips before we go on to the next thing. Though, I mean, I would suggest that if you look at I'd say both film versions of the War of the Worlds are superior alien invasion films, or just superior films in terms of execution, and the sense of cost, of people dying, of what it would mean to be on the ground when aliens invade. To take a film closer in time to Independence Day in Spielberg's War of the Worlds is a lot stronger, right?
I agree
and
completely.
And then when you talk about the sort of characters in other disaster films, well, it's worth remembering that Emmerich and Devlin were very explicit that Independence Day was their tribute to the 1970s disaster film, the Poseidon Adventure, the Towering Inferno, Earthquake, and so on. And it has that structure, right? That's why you have a million different characters, right? With a million familiar faces playing these characters, some of whom are going to disappear fairly early on. The kind of shorthand soap opera like plots that they have, right? It's got the formula of the 70s disaster film. Though, I mean, now the Poseidon Adventure is, there's no way you could call that film script subtle, right? When Gene Hackman arrives, his opening dialogue it sounds like he's reading the character notes as to, "Hi, I'm the rebellious priest." But that said, a lot of the characterization that you get in something like the Poseidon Adventure and the Towering Inferno seems surprisingly deft compared to what we get in Independence Day.
Oh, you be so careful right now, David. Are you trying to tell me that Harry Connick Jr. isn't a deep character in this? He's Raven. Come on, he's Raven.
We're using the word character loosely, even irresponsibly in this context.
Even irresponsible.
I mean, yeah. He is not much of a character in this. He's definitely just hamming it up for the camera, which I do appreciate because it's fun watching Harry Connick Jr. So, you don't know who that is, Becca, I assume?
No.
Okay, so Harry Connick Jr. has
really bad with names.
Had a film career. I wouldn't say a particularly stellar film career. Mostly, probably best known now for doing like romantic films and things of that nature, like Hallmark type movies. But what he's actually known for is as a jazz and blues and big band pianist, and has been a musician for most of his life. Used to have a daytime TV show, all these kinds of things. But has had, like dozens and dozens of albums and like tours and so on. And he plays big band type music and like jazz songs and those kinds of things. So
cool.
Yeah. So it's actually kind of fun for somebody who plays trumpet at this point in time, seeing a guy from the kind of music I'd be listening to a lot at that time as an actor in a movie, and then he dies.
Unfortunate. Hey, but at least the dog doesn't die.
Yeah, Boomer? Yeah.
The dog lives wonderfully.
Yeah, it turns out...
They get the beautiful cinematic shot of him diving into the maintenance cupboard while fire rushes down the tunnel. It's beautiful.
So, David may not remember this detail, but for those that have seen Independence Day Resurgence, it turns out that the aliens deliberately don't kill dogs because they think of them as superior creatures. Yeah. So that's why Boomer lives.
Oh, so they applied that invincibility shield to him so that
Yeah.
he would not be crisped by the fireball going by in consuming all the oxygen in the
Yeah,
tunnel.
because I don't think that's how that works.
No, not at all.
Like,
Not
I'm
at
sure
all.
they killed a lot of dogs in those initial explosions. Like,
But in seriousness, I mean, it did dawn on me, like, when I watched this the first time, I didn't think that the dog had any particular meaning, because I was a kid, like, I like dogs just fine, but it kind of stood out to me a little bit more here. Like, we have a yellow lab. Labs are kind of like your traditional family dog. And in a way, we get the like classic nuclear family reconstituted at the end of this with dog, like the kind of very classic image of the family, with the exception that this is a complicated family by the fact that at least one of its members has a profession that is broadly not considered to be respectable. I disagree. I think she's very good at her job, and I appreciate her candor and desire to do right by her child. She deserves a Nobel Prize for that. But the dog seemed like a fun little bit of like Americana kind of shoved in here, because that is like a very classic American family dog. It's not unique to Americans, to be clear.
It was also the era of dogs escaping catastrophes, because the following year you'd get an almost identical scene in Dante's Peak.
That's right! You do! Oh man, that movie's good.
That we agree.
I like Dante's Peak. I don't know why people dislike that movie. I think it's a perfectly fine movie.
I have never
It's
heard of it.
much better than Volcano.
Yeah, we watched Volcano recently. Volcano, no, Volcano's not intelligent on any axis that might matter for a film. Yeah.
Yeah, like he says in chat, my brain just totally died. I'm so sorry. There is a whole theme of pets surviving disasters that continues. There's a reason that there's a website that exists that is, does the dog die? Like, yeah.
Yeah.
They live for a reason, and it's because I want them to live.
They don't live in all the movies, Becca.
There was a film recently, I can't remember the name. I want to say Idris Elba was in it. The trailer actually said the dog survives.
That's funny. Holy crap. I'm sorry, I'm sorry.
Okay, so
yeah.
Look, I want to make sure that we give this sufficient time, because we've been talking for a little over 40 minutes as the time of this recording, and while David and I have been very civil so far in this conversation, you really should see the emails between us, because, whoo boy, they were pretty rough. But David has a particular grievance with this film, or issue per se, and I would love David to sort of give his perspective on that particular issue, because I think we need to talk about it. And so, David, I cede the floor to you.
Well, we touched on this already. It's the speech that you quoted at the beginning, which I know you find inspiring, and I find utterly loathsome. And in this, I am not alone. It's if you are not an American, that speech you're not going to be cheering that speech. You're going to be thinking, oh, fuck you, President Ernest. It's and I think, I mean, it's in the broader sense, I think it does certainly encapsulate the film. It's the logical end result of its title, but our holiday is now your holiday. I mean, you have to remember that for the rest of us, you're not the scrappy underdogs. You're the mile-wide spaceships, right?
15 mile wide.
15 mile wide. Thank
Sorry,
you.
we should put that in kilometers for the Canadians. Hold on. Give me a sec. 24.1402 kilometers.
There you go. What the spaceships do to those cities is what, certainly by that point in the 90s, what had happened to a lot of the, just to take one example, film cultures of a lot of other countries that could, just overwhelmed by the Hollywood machine. Just take one particular example, and I mean was it the Honest Trailers pointing out that the film's message of global unity is limited to the idea of America is the only one who can solve all the world's problems. The fact that we get that speech and then that absolutely appalling montage at the end of the film, once
It was pretty bad.
the counterattack, it's just yeah, it's I would say that it's aged like milk, except it was pretty horrifying in 1996 as well. And so that speech is the heart of it. So the film itself, therefore, is a really good example of, and again, we see it in that speech too, of what I call the invincible underdog syndrome, which is, this isn't a superhero film, but the superhero film is another example of that. Right, and you see, it's something that is particular to American popular culture, the need to be simultaneously the put upon underdog and absolutely overwhelmingly powerful. Right, so Superman being the text.
I would say that's not necessarily just an American thing, because that is a pretty popular trope in like manga.
It is, I guess. Well, I suppose the superhero itself. Yeah, no, that's very true with manga. Though there is,
yeah.
I mean, when I think of how much there's also this kind of the degree of body horror, of loss of identity, of self disintegration that we get in examples like, well, just like a carrot to take just one. So yeah, no, I should be cautious there. I mean, I certainly do think though that the superhero embodies that, particularly since I mean that's something that Stephen Bissett has pointed out, that I mean, if you look at sort of other comic book producing nations, I mean, yeah, you could point to, I think, perhaps some superhero adjacent things in manga, but the superhero itself is very much an American product, right? You look at what do you get in Italy? It's the supervillain that is the protagonist in comics. You look at France, you don't really get costume superheroes there either, and so Independence Day again is not a superhero film, but it has the impulse of one, right? Put Will Smith in a costume. That's all you'd need to do, right, to turn it into a superhero movie.
Well, they kind of turned it into like the military uniforms as the superhero costume, because the president putting on the flight suit, the all of the different like helmet options for all of the non-official pilots who end up, helping to save humanity, putting putting the two of them, Jeff Goldblum and Will Smith, in the flight suits with a hilarious amount of pockets and only 2 cigars.
Yeah.
So I can definitely see them like portraying the military as a sort of superhero outfit thing as well. So I definitely see your point there.
Yeah, no,
because all the people who turn out to be heroes don the uniform of the U.S. military.
Yes.
Right, and everyone who isn't is just a bystander. And so to then circle this all this then back to that speech, which I mean I think like that speech then goes with the montage we get, right? Where I think one of the key cringe lines is when we get the British soldiers like, oh, the Americans are mounting a counterattack. It's about time. What are they going to do? Or what So I mean, I do think that Emmerich becomes a more interesting filmmaker later, after he's no longer scripting with Devlin, and so that we get some very different spins on this. So that in The Day After Tomorrow in 2012, we have the shattered remnants of the developed world needing to turn to the developing world for rescue and for help. It's not this total reestablishment of hegemony that we get at the end of Independence Day.
And like, how convenient is it that the main alien mothership is just right above wherever they are? They don't really have to travel very far to get to it, you know?
Oh,
It's above
including,
America.
including wherever the characters happen to be, such as in the middle of nowhere, where Randy Quaid's family was. Like, why do they have one there?
There's Las Vegas is nearby. They're near Vegas, aren't they?
Yeah, I think that's the.
I mean, like, it's
the
probably
nearest,
the brightest spot on the planet. So blow that up.
Don't see that, though, do we?
We don't see it. No, I mean, we really only get like 3 cities we actually get to see blown up, and then remnants of other cities that have been blown up.
Also, they get to DC very quickly from New York, going
no, they were already
half
there.
the speed limit.
They
were
15,
already there.
They have 15 ships around the globe.
No, not them, not the aliens.
Oh,
talking about Jeff Goldblum.
Jeff Goldblum and his dad. Yeah, they get down to DC very fast.
Well, I mean, you know, Jet Hirsch has. I mean, he basically drives the same ship.
So Dennis Quaid is going to walk there from Washington to New York in Day After Tomorrow. So yeah, they're actually much closer together than most people think.
Yeah. I mean,
cycling distance.
Okay. Like, so, oh boy, how do I?
4 hours.
David
Okay, 4 hours
here?
Makes sense.
How do we do this? No, I'm just kidding, David.
I guess my sense of time is usually off because I usually take a bus up to New York, so that's why.
Okay, yeah.
I don't drive.
It's not really that far. Anyway, okay, so I know that David is right that in terms of, like, this is one of the probably most aggressive criticisms of the film. You could probably be rather aggressive in its very patriarchal approaches because it, frankly, does not treat women characters terribly well. It has moments. But I think it technically passes the Bechdel test, I think, because don't they talk about something other than a man?
Technically, yes.
Doing a lot of heavy lifting there.
Yeah, well, but as Alison Bechdel even notes, like, this is not your, like, get out of bad filmmaking gender problems card.
Yeah. This is a case study of that, right?
Yeah, precisely. Just because you have a scene doesn't mean the rest of the film. Yeah, but you know, the BBC, someone at the BBC like wrote that the speech in particular is the most jaw-droppingly pompous soliloquy ever delivered at a mainstream Hollywood movie, which I suppose may be true. And I get it. I get why to the rest of the world this speech in particular does not come across as inspiring, as you know, like, very poetic and beautiful and, like, roaring and, like, to get all that, because, you know, I think this film forgets that it's exactly what David's talking about, that the United States, especially in the this is like post-Berlin Wall, like, this is the Soviet Union's collapse. There's all this talk. It's the end of history. Right, it's the end of history, as Fukuyama and Jameson would say. Where there's all this talk like, well, you know, American-style capitalism has won, and, like, we've won the big ideological war, and, like, rah, America in 1996. And, of course, you know, the United States is operating as, you know, like, U.S. world police. Later we get a film called Team America, which, like, deliberately tears that idea apart in a ridiculous display of marionettes. And so the film wants us to think of the United States as the leader of the world, right? And emphasis on the world, because I think this film deliberately shows us not just what is often referred to as the free world, with quotes around it, whatever that really means, but it simultaneously wants to also think that the United States is incapable of defending itself. So everyone looks up to us, but the United States is also weak and frail. Like, look how we have to rely on a cable repairman basically to like solve our problems because that's where, we're the scrappy underdog, as David correctly points out. And so I think this film would be better served if it just dumped the scrappy underdog narrative and instead we're just admitting this is a film that is about an America at arguably its peak in terms of its power in the world. It is effectively the place the world is looking to for guidance, at least in terms of how to blow things up really good. And so that's what this film is ultimately doing. That said, I just can't. I'm sorry, David. My skin is just like goosebumps every time that speech comes on, and I think it's because even I get it. It's a good speech. Yeah, it's the most American holiday like you could think of, like Independence Day, July 4th. Like it's massive in the United States as a holiday. Maybe they could have chosen some other day, like Veterans Day, or I mean, I guess that wouldn't matter, but like some other.
Wouldn't be
Arbor Day.
Be as
Choose
snappy
Arbor
as a movie
Day.
title.
With trees. It'll be about trees, right? Obviously that doesn't have the same impact as it would for Americans, because for Americans, July 4th is like a pretty big holiday. But at the same time, I think this film, Emmerich just doesn't know how to do it enough. This film wants us to believe in this idea that all of the peoples of the world, like your differences don't matter. We all come together because we have a common interest, which is what the speech gets across. And Whitmore is citing the only reference he really has in that moment. He picks July 4th. It's the day you have to pick because it's July 4th. It's literally the day. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, on the one hand, obviously from the perspective of especially parts of the world where American hegemony have had a particularly aggressive force, that is going to land like with a massive thud of best case scenario groaning, and at worst case scenario like what's the word I'm like revilement, whatever that term. Revulsion, yeah, vomitousness. But in the context of the film, it is meant to be our uplifting moment of unity, where there is no such thing as like the United States at that moment. It is like Independence Day is everybody. We're all independent together, which certainly the film
it doesn't even make grammatical sense.
I get it. That's fine, David.
Don't think about it too hard.
It's fine. He can't help it. He's sitting on top of the United States and has to constantly listen to my terrible jokes about how great America is and how ridiculous America is. Like, oh, we're better than Canada. And then Canada's over there going like, well, we still have healthcare that mostly you can use. And what do you got over there? Like, I mean, it's got to be annoying to live outside the United States and constantly hear Americans talk about how great America is when like the only thing we can consistently say we're great at is we're better at blowing people up than other people that blow people up, which is true. We are. We just are better at blowing other people up. That is like our number one export, blowing people up.
Is that why they never show like the other countries doing literally anything?
Well, they get to tell us
to blow up the aliens. Yeah,
part of that's probably
they don't
budget.
Actually show it. Yeah,
well,
that's fair.
I mean that moment, that one of the most awful shots is the one in Africa, because I'm surprised you didn't even see it say Africa at the bottom of the screen.
Well, they showed us the pyramids. What more do you want? What do you want? They showed us the pyramids.
Oh, I was thinking of the one where we have the people with the shields and the spears, because of course that's all that they have.
Yeah. The sort of caricatures of other cultures, yeah.
Yes.
Well, it is, you're right, David, because it is a very curious thing. Unlike how Americans get to have those images where it's like all the different flavors of American, right? Where we're all like united in common awe of the monsters in the sky. Other cultures get reduced down to fairly narrow stereotypes, especially if they're not if they're like not places where the West has been, because curiously the one spot where we get the British, they're working in conjunction with I assume Afghanistan or someplace. I don't remember. I don't know exactly where they are. They don't tell us.
I'm surprised they weren't wearing pith helmets
is it Egypt?
In that moment.
Is that what they're supposed to be?
No, I think it was Arabic. I think
it is Arabic, but like, where the hell are they? It was Iraq. Was
it's got that.
Iraq.
It
That's
has
what
this.
somebody's
It has
saying
the
in chat.
same whiff to it as in Armageddon, where when some of the Michael Bay's montages, where any of the scenes that take place out of a city, everyone's wearing wearing overalls and sitting around the Cracker Barrel listening to the radio, or sorry, the wireless, to because they're still stuck in 1952. It has that same kind of retrograde shorthand, and yeah, the British are, it's some sort of, yeah, it feels like some kind of outpost of the British Empire,
Right?
that
It feels like
they're
it would be
communicating to the
Egypt.
BBC World Service.
Yeah, but it doesn't make
Yeah, there was
sense.
no.
Where the frick
There
are
was
they?
a shot with the pyramids. It was not the same shot with
No.
the British.
No, the British
Okay,
are
and
just
also-
like-
And also, the
It's almost
pyramids are
sandy.
actually really close to a metropolitan center, like really close.
yeah, no, they're
but
like
you
literally
never
right
see
there.
that. You
Yeah.
never
No.
see that in films. It's always looking the other direction, so they
Yeah.
look like they're in the middle of fucking nowhere. They are. You can look at them from. Well, you're sitting in a Pizza Hut, and I'm not kidding.
I'm
There are
genuinely
photos.
bewildered right now, David, because this is a detail, like, the film does, it's a blip in the movie, right? But, like,
yeah.
the United States, we mostly don't get its international presence here, except through peoples it has interacted with, I suppose.
Yeah.
But, like, we don't have to question, like, oh, they're in Washington, D.C., because there's the White House, and look, it got blowed up. Or there is, the Empire State Building, that got blowed up. There's, like, recognizable things that tell us where we are. But when we go to these other places, yes, we get the pyramids, which tell us in that brief blip in the montage, that's where we are.
That's the only recognizable
Yeah,
monument's
Physical
not the right
recognizable
word,
thing
but
other than the Sydney Opera House.
landmark.
Which,
Yeah.
But
Right.
So, like,
yeah.
I mean, each country's got, like, and this is sort of, there's a long tradition of this, right? I mean, if you're going to see a shot from Australia, it's the Sydney Opera House. France, Paris, the Eiffel Tower, or France, the Eiffel Tower. India, Taj Mahal, right? Russia, the Kremlin. It's it's going to be like the one thing that people would instantly recognize. And okay, fair enough, right? It tells you you're in these other places, and it's a brief blink and you'll miss an acknowledgement that these other places exist.
But, like, the UK thing, though, is the only one. I can't remember if there's a title that tells us where we are. I genuinely cannot remember.
They don't tell you anywhere. It's just that for some reason, the British soldiers are somewhere hot. Wherever they are, it's not England.
Right. No. Well, clearly, because they have people who are speaking some version of Arabic there.
Mm-hmm.
But, like, again, the Middle East, where much of Arabic is spoken, like, that's a lot of different places that speak Arabic. It's not like one place. So it's so weird to me that, like, we even get titles for some of the other spots, like, where we shouldn't have to guess. Like, they go to, like, Russia at one point, and it's like they just start speaking Russian, and you just go, okay, like, somewhere in that vague territory, right? Here's, like, this weird building in the middle of nowhere where they park their planes, right? But why is that scene? Like, is it like a weird, subtle, like, Roland Emmerich, like, I've moved to the United States, I've now become an American citizen, like, fuck the British? Like, is that what this is? Like, I just don't, and I'm bewildered by this moment. I'm sorry, David.
He's German, not British.
No, he's German and American. He's an American citizen.
It's weird.
Yeah. And again, I mean, I don't know. I mean, to what degree also I would put some of this down to Devlin's contribution, because I do see a pretty stark difference between the films Emmerich made with Devlin and the ones he made without him. Yeah. Right? You get the very kind of sort of the really big flag waving ones in the Devlin era. So Independence Day and The Patriot, to take the two most obvious examples. Yeah. Okay. And then, and so then when you especially when you look at sort of like big spectacle disaster movies, when you look at, we compare what you get in Independence Day with The Day After Tomorrow and 2012, and it's such a different approach there. Right. Now, certainly what happened, one of the things that does happen in between Independence Day and those other films is the Bush years. And when Emmerich left the States, he just could not found it too politically horrifying to stay there, and so he went back to Europe under Bush, and so whether that is we're seeing at play there or not, but nonetheless, the love of disaster, of the huge strange moment. There's certain types of characters that are certainly familiar. Again, we're going to get the earnest president in just about all of them, but then things keep playing out differently, right? And one of my favorite moments in 2012 is when Danny Glover starts big inspirational speech, right? Yeah. It's to bring them all together, and I'm sure we can all agree though on I think it's Psalm 23 that he starts to recite, and he the Lord's my shepherd, I shall not, and then he gets cut off immediately, and everything explodes, and it's kind of equivalent to the what happens with Samuel L. Jackson's inspirational speech in Deep Blue Sea. So it feels like almost kind of answering back, right? Now he would return. Now, granted, in Resurgence, he would try to recreate the moment of the say Crispin's Day speech in Independence Day, and I mean the result there was just embarrassing, not offensive. But I can't.
They can't all be winners.
No. Well, it certainly wasn't. I'm just curious. I'm not. So many writers getting credits for a Resurgence. I don't know if Devlin had any involvement with that one or not. It might just be based on his characters. So, anyway, all just is to say that I to some of the stuff that we're talking about with like the other worlds, the other parts of the world. You see something very different in the subsequent films in the same genre that Emmerich would make.
Okay.
So yeah, but don't want to speculate too much, not really knowing who contributed to what in the screenplay for Independence Day.
Yeah. In chat, by the way, Paul did look up the script to see what the script says about where they are. The British air pilots apparently are in the Golan Heights, so between Israel, Syria, somewhere in that territory, which then theoretically...
Why are they there?
I don't know. I mean, maybe they just got lost. Again, like, I suppose at this point, maybe there were British pilots stationed, in Germany, and they just, flew. I don't know if you can fly jet fighters to the Middle East from there, but maybe they left and they just went, where's the best place we can go that, frankly, the aliens are unlikely to blow up next? Well... yeah,
where can we retreat to?
Realistically, are the alien... I mean, no offense to the Middle East, but there are only a handful of nations with pretty sizable militaries that I suppose the aliens would care about. And so you go where it's maybe more remote. You go where... it is harder for the aliens to get to you because they're not going to move their saucer ships over like a mountain range. They're going to go to the next big
everybody didn't just come here. I don't know.
Well, I mean, let's be real, David. What's in Canada?
Tim Hortons.
They do have the Moose Army. You have the Moose Army up there. You're right. They really should have gone there first. Yeah,
but they went to Australia and took out the emus first.
Yeah, but that's because the emus defeated
Finally putting
the Australians.
That war to
like the Great Emu War. No.
Everybody's scared of cassowaries.
I mean, why don't they go to, Toronto's a very big city, and it's not really that far from the places they do blow up.
Yeah, but they really only talk about continental United States, on
yeah, they don't even go to Mexico City is not even mentioned.
Yeah, they only hit the U.S.
Yeah.
Toronto and Vancouver can't actually be officially acknowledged as canonically existing in American films because they play LA and New York so often. Right. So if you actually admitted there was a place called Toronto, and then you start to, wait a minute, this is Toronto, not New York City. However, if you don't know that Toronto is a place, then it can carry on playing New York.
Oh, got it. Okay, this explains why so many films filmed in Vancouver don't ever mention that they're filmed in Vancouver, because it's probably illegal. Yeah. Even though like half of science fiction television has been filmed in Canada the last 25 years, so... Oh, ridiculous. Okay, well, regardless, it's a weird bit of us trying to, like, uncover things Roland Emmerich probably did not care enough about to really think through.
Yeah, it's like we're deep diving in all these things that were probably a throwaway on the script that day.
There's probably some...
Like, it'd be nice if we could film from here.
Yeah. I mean... Yeah, I'm not suggesting that Emmerich's treatment of this thematic of, like, uniting the people, as it were, is a particularly well-imagined version, because if so, you couldn't make this film. You'd have to actually, like, deal with the complicated political and, relationship. This film can only do that because it just basically... Aliens show up... Everyone's going to unite, right? So, like, just wipe out all of the differences, which is incredibly idealistic and works for a film that is very much about idealism and not necessarily about, like, how does a world that is as deeply divided as certainly today we are actually unite in the face of something like this rather than look for opportunities to backstab. I suppose the solution to that would be you make the aliens even more destructive and they're just wiping out entire continents. And then maybe, we got to pause our...
I think that happens in Resurgence, doesn't it?
Yeah, because this is... But
at that point, the first continent they would take out, logically, would be the U.S.
Well, they'd have to, because the last time they were here, the United States led the fight back. So you would go. But, I mean... I like Arturo's take in chat. They have an instinct to forcibly redecorate public spaces. Realistically, it's probably like the vaguest of logic was probably those are the resource centers because they were coming to Earth to strip it of all of its resources, and those are the big cities are probably your most resource dense places. Yeah,
but no, they just wanted to redecorate for us.
Yeah.
But again, and that's the thing. I mean, logic doesn't apply in this film. Why are telepathic aliens using our satellites to communicate with each other? Good thing that was here. But and really, I mean, there isn't really much there that holds up to that kind of scrutiny. But also, it doesn't matter, right? Do I buy the sort of the everyone all coming together thing? I mean,
no, you don't, yes, David. Just
if I squint, but what the film does do well, and I think it does it very well, is the spectacle, right? And I think just pure spectacle is undervalued as a strength in films, because the fact that you can that almost 30 years later, I mean, this is a film that you look at the special effects and you still go, wow, right? The
alien ships look pretty dang cool.
They do. Their arrival is amazing. I mean, they are, and and then the big blow up scenes are extremely cool, right? There is it shows that that it isn't like already in '96 we were certainly approaching the stage that where we are now, where you can show absolutely anything you can think of on screen, right? So you have the problem, well, if everything is special, is nothing special, right? But the thing is, that is in many ways is a false question that I've just raised there, because you can put something huge and amazing on screen, but the way it's shot matters. The way it is presented is enormously important.
Yes.
Right. We talked about how in Resurgence it doesn't work. I mean, for just about any I'd be hard pressed to think of any superhero film where I had a oh wow moment of a sense of awe of something that is really amazing or impressive, or that, I'm sitting there going, look at that.
Maybe
right?
in like the first
Where,
wave, but not in any recent ones for sure.
Winter Soldier would be it for me.
Yeah. Like in the
Yeah,
earlier era of Marvel movies, but now it's like, now they're just dropping cash grabs in the bucket.
Well, but
even there, I'd be hard pressed to think of moments that stood out the way like the arrival of the ships do.
yeah,
Right,
certainly.
there's still too many sky beams and floating faces, even in the in the first wave. Emmerich at his best can sort of look at the screen and say, okay, wouldn't it be amazing if this is what we were seeing? Right. And so the plot and the characters in Independence Day are just functional enough to get us from one spectacle to another. Right. The arrival of the ships, the big explosions, then going into the ship at the end. Right, the big dog fights, right? Those are the things that that linger and that still look great. The dialogue, the characterizations, no, but the images will rock.
We gotta wrap up here pretty soon, but I agree mostly, except with what you said just a second ago, because that really hurt me, David, and I expect a written apology later. But the thing that I think this film does remarkable with visuals is very similar to what Fury Road does remarkably with visuals, which is it is very conscious of the moments it's going to use special effects and the way it uses those effects for maximal impact. This film in particular, Fury Road's somewhat different, because I would say Fury Road is maybe more...
Fucking love that movie.
Fury Road isn't selecting locations in the way this one is. I don't know exactly what that means, but by choosing very recognizable locations and making this big show of exploding them with really remarkable levels of detail, because they made thousands of miniatures that they then like threw fire down. Like there's literally a sequence where you see the fire like snaking around the buildings. That's not all CG. Cool. I watched the special where they literally were shooting fire down this like big thing they made of a city, and then would capture it in slow motion with slow-mo cam so they could get the fire snaking around. And then I imagine they did some touch-up digitally. It's 96.
That's still pretty cool.
Well, it's still fairly early in the CG era, right? So yeah, early. You're going to get mostly practical effects, and you can feel there's the physicality of practical effects that really makes a difference.
Yes. The freaky biomechanical suits or whatever of the aliens, that was...
And this is a thing that freaky. I think David and probably Becca, you would agree too, which is like if you go back in time in film before we could just effectively replace things with CG creatures, good or bad, right? There's a point at which now, well, okay, I want to show this thing that can't literally exist. How I shoot that matters, right? If we go to 1979's Alien, right? Alien's very deliberate. It does show us the xenomorph at a bunch of different times, but like they don't have the practical ability for like wild wire work, so they don't show it like in full all the time. So it's just always walking down like in this robotic stance. They shoot it very carefully. They show close-ups of the like little inner mouth gizmo and so on. This film does that as well, right? Like it doesn't just show us, like a big fireball and then that's kind of it. It like really gets these deliberate choices of where it wants to show the practical effect. And then, they put money there. They put a crap load of money into blowing up cities, which good for you. And I feel like in some way that's kind of been lost a little bit in some modern cinema, where it's just like, well, we can just do it in CG now, right? It'll have the same impact. And like, I don't know how, David, you feel about this, or you, Becca, but no, unless you're going to put an extraordinary amount of money into making it real and you really consider the way you shoot it, for me, the practical effect is always more terrifying, more exciting, more more alarming and amazing. That's why Fury Road for me was like a breath of fresh air. They use CG in that to enhance shots, but like they built all these crazy contraptions, and to put it on screen and to see it come at you, right, with all the different ways they shot them, like it just feels more visceral and real, and it goes in my brain and sticks there in a way that like so much of like Prometheus just kind of is like the special effects mostly have just disappeared, except for clouds. They did clouds really well. There are a lot of beautiful clouds. But
it's like how the original Jurassic Park will always have the better dinosaurs.
Yes, dude. When that freaking T-Rex eye, like right up close, and
that was fucking freaky because it was a practical effect, and it just comes across so much better. Probably doesn't help that the animatronic would
periodically just move on its own, supposedly, and so
it haunted. That entire set was haunted.
But you're right. Like I mean, I think David would agree too. Like that T-Rex head, the animatronic head they made, it's more terrifying. It feels more like if that comes at you, like does your brain at that point, like, do you know, like, does your brain just at that point go, no, fight or flight? Like I'm freaking out. It's a dinosaur, right? To me, that's my reaction.
I remember, I saw Jurassic Park opening weekend, and the audience that I was with, people were terrified.
Yes.
In that, and in the raptors in the kitchen scene, right? Because it has that visceral effect, and I mean certainly it's something that Spielberg is past master of, right? Whether it's Duel, whether it's Jaws, whether it's Jurassic Park, or I mean I think one of the things that that War of the Worlds does extremely well is that whereas Independence Day does give us the awe that all these people are feeling as they look up, right? War of the Worlds gives us the terror that they're experiencing.
Yeah.
Right. The ground level. Now, the fact that War of the Worlds is a very, very consciously and explicitly post 9/11 film is also a factor there too.
Yeah, it was. They didn't take out the towers in this one.
They did not.
Like they did in that last torture cinema movie I did.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that you bring up the War of the Worlds because I think that the Spielberg War of the Worlds film is wildly underrated.
Another film I have not seen.
2005, if I'm correct.
Sounds right. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think it does a very nice job of transposing Wells's novel, it's surprisingly faithful to the book.
Yeah.
Even updating everything, but almost all the thematic beats are there, and it does give you this constant sense of if you were just one of the people, what it would feel like just be an ordinary person and aliens invaded.
Yeah, I agree. It's a very different focus point, I think, for the film. Yeah, which is interesting. There's an interesting comparison to be made. There's someone named David Annandale. When you finally have free time, you should write that story, or write that article. Yeah. Okay.
Am I gonna get shanked if I also say I never saw Alien?
Yes, that you will 100% be getting a letter from both of us about.
Sorry.
Okay, Becca.
It happens to be my favorite film.
I'm
good.
Wimp when it comes to horror movies.
Okay, I get it. Yeah. I get it.
I am, baby.
No, I totally get it. That is a film that is... it's very scary. Yeah. Anyway, we'll save it. Okay. Look, okay, so folks,
another one.
That is the end of the podcast. We're going to wind up now. But I did have a question. David, did you have a film that you wanted us to do between this and the other film I'm making you do against your will? Or are we just going...
I didn't have anything in mind because I assumed that you were double billing me, basically.
Great. Okay. So the thing I've done to David is I picked two movies that David has strong opinions about. One of them was this one, which we've now done. And the other one is the 1999 Mummy, which we are going to cover. And David and I might actually have a screaming match on that one. Independence Day, we'll
be coming to blows on that one.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
I love that one.
because I know David has strong opinions, the thing I said to David was, I will let you pick any 2 movies to go after that of your choice. You can punish me however you wish. The only rules I have for David is, like, there are certain things I just can't watch in film because David is a horror person. He understands I don't like the, like, extreme, visceral, like, torturing, gory kind of stuff where it's just like, let's have a 5-minute
just Cannibal
scene.
Holocaust off the list.
Right. That would be something I physically could not
Torture
handle.
porn.
I can't do that.
Yeah.
But you can go weird. You can go wherever you want, David, afterwards, because you have maybe watched some very weird films. Not all of them are films I necessarily have liked, but have found interesting. And some of them I very much enjoyed. But I know in your brain, David, there's something like Turkish alien Star Wars or something somewhere in your mind that you have on, like, some DVD that was, like, burned in someone's car. I bet you've got it, and you're going to get me with it. So,
Burned in someone's car. Okay.
Yeah. They replaced their regular CD player with a DVD burner.
Yes, we do.
That's what we do. Anyway, so
As
David will
you
pick
do.
those next. But we will be watching The Mummy for the next Totally Pretentious, 1999's Mummy with America's sweetheart, Brendan Fraser. Okay, with that in mind, the show done. So if you like the episode, you have any thoughts, you'd like to let us know your thoughts about Independence Day, you can go to skiffyandfanty.com/listener suggestions, get our newsletter at /newsletter. We are on all the socials except X as at Skiffy and Fanty, so Threads, Blue Sky, all of those places. We have a link tree which has all of the links, including to our Patreon. That is linktr.ee/skiffyandfanty. That is where you will find all of our stuff. I am at this channel, Alphabet Streams on Twitch, where Skiffy and Fanty is live every Friday at 7 p.m. unless I'm dead. And you can find my link tree with all my links, which is just /Shaun Duke instead.
And you can find me on Mastodon at david.annandale at social.horrorhub.club and on Facebook. And at my website, davidannandale.com.
You can find me at Dicey Druid on Twitch and on a couch somewhere reading manga while plotting world domination with my cat.
Excellent. All right. I'm not actually going to make this awkward because I think this was awkward enough for David this whole time.
Poor David.
That's not true.
Not as awkward as next time.
No. Next time might get intense. I might have to do some extra research. Because
I would do so much research for the Mummy.
I know David has super strong feelings about the Mummy. I know.
I love the Mummy.
I also know I'm in a very lonely minority.
Yes,
but on
you
the right
are.
side of history.
You're on the wrong side.
Theoretically.
Anyways.
Theoretically, David, you won't have 2 people team up on you because I'm not mean. So, anyway.
Theoretically.
All right, folks. On that note, awkward ending and scene. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks for coming.